And fallen leaves. Adorn.
Everybody stand! You're toast! Nice and quick!
Here comes the finale. Step right up.
Hey, welcome to the Lyney FAQ just in time for his rerun. Now, Lyney is an interesting character to TC and speedrun with. I think maybe because he's one of the less popular characters, there's a lot of misconceptions with him. Now, I'm definitely not the Lyney master, not even close, but I do think I've learned a few things over time that could be helpful to share, so that's why we're doing this FAQ. So let's get started. So Mika Soulsborne asking, position in the meta worth pulling? There's also quite a few questions about the amount of skill required to play Lyney optimally, maybe comparing to other characters. So I've been honest about it whenever someone asks me this. If you like Lyney and you want to main him, then go for it. But the thing with Lyney is you have to be really willing to play Lyney and this fragile bow character playstyle. It can be frustrating at times, but I enjoy it. But just like ganyu, it's safe to say that most people don't enjoy this playstyle at all. And I actually consider Lyney and ganyu probably the two hardest DPSs to play well in Genshin. The other thing is you may be wanting to play him due to seeing some amazing speedruns, or maybe you've read about his high theoretical DPS and how strong he is. And I can speak about it from my experience, and the brutal truth is gameplay like this that you might see, you have to be both really good at the game and also willing to retry a lot. And I'm definitely not the best player at all. There's much better players than me for sure, but I guess I'm someone who's fairly good at the game and a content creator. And the reality is probably like 90% of people will not be able to even play a shieldless team like this, let alone make a team like this look good. And even something as small as having to play zhongli instead of someone like Kazuha or zhongli here will make his abyss clear seem much less impressive. So I really lower my expectations when it comes to how the average player experiences Lyney. Then I don't think you should be pulling him for strength, because like I said, the strength most of you will get is unfortunately not the same strength that more hardcore players will get. It is what it is. But of course, at the end of the day, pull who you like. That's always been my stance when it comes to DPSs. So if you like Lyney, then please go ahead and pull him. Just play him because you like him and not for strength, unless you're willing to put the time in to practice and get really good. And like I said, maybe do a bit of resetting here and there. So there were a few questions in regards to his artifact sets, and I thought it would be a good idea to expand on my previous video. I honestly think the sad thing about playing around his artifact set is another reason why a lot of people haven't had fun with him and find him frustrating to play. Basically, the TLDR is Lyney is not Neuvillette. He doesn't constantly drain his HP, and his 5-second crit buff duration is actually an issue for him. Each time you switch to Lyney, you basically need to stand still and do a couple charge attacks to build crit rate, which if you've played Lyney a bunch, you'll know there's a good chance of him just dying doing that. These hats that make the pyrotechnic strike also snapshot, meaning both them and your charge attack might not have much crit. And also his burst has really nice AoE and invincibility frames, so it's often nice starting off with it, which you can't really do with a 4-piece Marechaussee Hunter set. Otherwise you're going to have really low crit when doing this. But yeah, here's some calcs I did in the monopyro team. 3 charge attacks being fully buffed is actually pretty unrealistic, so even these numbers here are almost a perfect scenario for Marechaussee Hunter. So as you can see, if you lower the amount of charge attacks, the results can get weaker. And also again, if you do start with this burst, either because it has amazing AoE or you want the iframes, then mix sets can even calculate to be better. Now that's not to say that 4-piece Marechaussee Hunter is bad on him. It's just that all those practical issues we just discussed, combined with trying to farm a better set that has more substats than a random set you might already have, it can make it overall not very appealing, and I don't find it too worth it unless you're always playing him with Furina. And yeah, bear in mind this is not a high amount of substats ahead. Even in this ideal scenario, it's quite easy for you to have random mix sets like Gladius Finale, Shimenawa, Crimson Witch, that it would just have more substats. So I have seen a few comments saying that this artifact advice is very niche, stuff like it's only a consideration for speedrunning. I've seen people say stuff like this on YouTube or Discord or Reddit, but I don't think that makes much sense. Why? Let's discuss it. So you're telling me a hardcore player is saying you can just use any mix sets you have around and you don't need to spend months and months in artifact hell grinding a 4p set, but the casual player is saying no, I'd rather do this grind. Then secondly, you're telling me the hardcore player is saying you can play Lyney flexibly and use whatever you want to do damage, sometimes do charge attacks, sometimes do burst, but the casual player is saying no, I'd rather follow a strict rotation and charge attack combo every time I switch to Lyney to utilize this artifact set. I don't think it makes that much sense, right? It sounds like the speedrunner is the casual. I just refuse to believe casual players would rather play with more restrictions and grind harder. I've also seen some people might say just play Lyney with Furina to drain his HP faster and use the set. First of all, that was mentioned in the video, but also you can't just assume everyone plays Lyney with Furina. In fact, according to recent usage rate surveys, as you can see, only a minority of players do that. And then the last argument was that some people say you can just play Lyney with zhongli, and then because you're under zhongli's shield, you can guarantee a bunch of charge attacks on Lyney to maximize your crit rate. But the thing with that is, if you're playing Lyney zhongli in the first place, then to be honest, you don't really care about maximizing DPS in the first place. What you're going for with teams like this is comfort and chill play, which is totally fine by the way, but the point is, then why would you really care about optimizing a few percents of damage through optimizing artifacts? So yeah, honestly, I think using mix sets and not worrying too much about the Marechaussee Hunter grind is very much relevant for a majority of Lyney players. Sure, some people might want to farm sets and I can't stop them, but you can literally use whatever sets you have around, like any different attack sets, Gladiator's Finale, maybe you have Crimson Witch pieces, even 2-piece Marechaussee Hunter, whatever gives you the most useful roles works well. And in fact, even if you are playing Lyney Furina, then you might have a cracked 4-piece Wanderer's Troop set from leveling your characters. In this team, Lyney benefits from both the 2-piece and the 4-piece effect. But yeah, of course, at the end of the day, spend your resin how you want. If you want to farm a 4-piece Marechaussee Hunter set or just grind this domain because it's considered efficient, then you can argue that's a good idea. You're free to do that. In regards to lavawalker, I just did a quick calc on it. It's barely ahead, and that's if you have a similar amount of substats on your lavawalker set that you do on your random mix sets, which you probably don't. By the way, this whole substat thing is very easy to test. You can see if I just remove one crit damage substat from lavawalker, you can now see it's just under. So yeah, it's about one substat higher than the mix sets. And obviously this is for mono pyro teams. There's a lot of people asking about zhongli teams, like how good are Lyney's teams with defensive utility. And yeah, the facts are, as I've said before on this channel, I think most players play Lyney with zhongli. They can't really play shieldless teams. I notice Current Abyss has the Geo enemy in Chamber 3, so it's a bit biased towards zhongli, but if you check previous patches, you would know that Lyney zhongli was always his most popular teams. And yeah, right under this question is someone talking about being unable to play Lyney without zhongli. This is very normal, by the way. So Lyney zhongli teams either do something like this, or you play both zhongli and Kazuha. And I'm sure there are some simulation calculations around comparing the teams versus shieldless teams, but they won't have the full context. In practice, the single target damage loss isn't that bad, honestly, but in AoE it's quite huge. You're either losing Xiangling's AoE damage or Kazuha's grouping and his decent AoE damage. The thing with Lyney is that his kit is split very differently between the types of attacks. His charge attacks technically have some but almost no AoE. His skill has okay AoE and his burst has pretty great AoE, to be honest. So what this means is, with proper grouping in your team, you're kind of able to better utilize these different degrees of AoE and get more out of your attacks. So when you think of Lyney being one of the strongest DPSs, it's because of playstyles like this where he can almost cheat his way out of being a theoretically single target based DPS and get some nice AoE damage, which you lose a lot of when playing shielded teams, honestly. But like I said, most players probably can't play teams like this anyway, so unfortunately it is what it is. But in a team with zhongli, should zhongli be wielding Archaic Petra? It's a good question. So obviously Petra has great damage buffs to your team, but it actually has issues with uptime in Lyney teams from my experience. Whether you're using zhongli before Bennett or before Shungling or whatever, you're probably not getting full uptime on this. So I did some quick calcs, and in a straight shootout, Petra is theoretically quite a bit better than tenacity of the Neuvillette, but as you can see, as I remove uptime on it and some of Lyney's attacks start losing the buffs, you can see it gets quite a bit weaker. Whereas with tenacity, as long as his pillar isn't destroyed, it's an unconditional 20% attack bonus for your team, which is quite nice. Obviously these buffs are not just for Lyney, they're for his team, so Petra will also increase Shungling's damage more, so you can consider that. But here's also my perspective on it. So if someone's playing zhongli, it's because they find shieldless Lyney too hard or annoying to play, and in that case, Petra and having to pick up your shards is also annoying to play. But then again, picking up Petra shards in a mono team is kind of the easier situation for a Petra character, so it's not as bad as it could be. Like for comparison, Petra zhongli in a Neuvillette vape team is much more difficult to play. But my thoughts are, if you're going down the route of wanting to play an easy and chill Lyney team with the shield, then you might as well just use tenacity. The buffs are a bit weaker, but it's easy to play and you don't need to care too much about it. Does Lyney have a rotation you can follow, or you just play it through the flow of battle? He technically can, but I don't really follow them much. Like I said earlier, his attacks have different degrees of AoE and utility, so if you're fighting a bunch of enemies, I don't see the point of just standing there charge attacking one enemy when you could hit all of them with your burst. Also, if you're playing without a shield, it's good to utilize the invincibility frames of some attacks, and you also might want to flexibly switch in and out of different characters. Like if you can see a big attack coming from Grapelia, you're not gonna just stand there and load up a charge attack. So this is another popular topic, a lot of people asking about overload teams with Chevreuse, and I'm gonna be honest, I really don't think people should be playing these teams unless you want to try something different or for fun. But then again, I don't really see these teams as much fun anyway. The problem is that I know why many people are drawn to these overload teams, and unfortunately the biggest reason is because people are aware that there are DPS calculations going around that these teams do like 90,000 or 100,000 DPS, like the most DPS in the game or whatever. So people think they should be playing it because it's theoretically the strongest Lyney team. And I don't want to attack anyone's calcs, but the truth is these teams are just not that impressive in practice. And there are many assumptions in these calcs that you guys should read about. Like for example, your official may not be fully buffed in the first rotation because you need something to overload with, unless maybe you're doing a charge attack on official, but realistically who's doing that? There's also no grouping because you can't use an animo teammate. There's also no shields or interrupt resistance unless for some reason you're using a teammate like Toma or Beidou, and obviously you can't play zhongli in these teams either. So yeah, to answer your question, technically the optimal team is like Chevreuse official, and you can try this team out and maybe you'll like it, but I'm pretty sure most people will try it and hate it and just go back to his other teams. But then again, this is just my experience. There's also quite a few people asking about Lyney vape teams with Furina. I would say vape is pretty good, especially if you have some constellations on your Furina or your Kazuha, but it does require precise setups to make sure your Lyney is fully buffed and you're vaping his attacks. It can also require a bunch of retries to get the timing right, plus it's more of a single target team than an AoE team, especially if you replace Kazuha with Shungling, then this is definitely a single target team. But even in single target, you can have energy problems, since now you have a solo Hydra Furina who needs her burst and less pyro energy going around the team to supply Lyney with his own burst. But but it can be quite fun to play. In this team, Lyney is doing the vaping, and then if you're using zhongli here, then Furina is doing the vaping. But I would say overall these teams are harder to play and less flexible than a mono pyro team. I would still say personally mono pyro teams are my favorite teams and most recommendable for both casual play and speedruns, but vape teams are still good options if you want to play them. Some people are also asking about his speedrunning teams, like what's his best speedrun team at full cost. So I recommend watching AR's channel. They're a content creator who makes lots of Lyney speedrun videos. Their vape teams do work really well, but it's more in the 7 to 8 cost range. There's some consolations here. There are some lower cost teams where Furina is doing the vaping, but like I said, this is more limited to single target content. But personally, I'd be recommending monopyro teams, zhongli, Kazuha, Bennett, getting Lyney's signature weapon. This plus Lyney and Kazuha is 3 cost, and that's a really great start. You don't really need too much more at that point. You could get a weapon upgrade for Bennett's buff, maybe engulfing for zhongli's energy and damage. Lyney's C1 is also pretty strong, but yeah, this team just works great at C0. On a similar topic, someone else is asking how would you rank Lyney as a speedrunning unit for comparison to other units at similar levels of investment. Honestly, I think he's in a similar boat to basically everyone else at the moment. Neuvillette teams are just so much easier than other teams to get speedrun videos of. Neuvillette just has the least RNG with a very easy and consistent playstyle. I guess I would also say Navia teams are easy to play and get speedruns of, but she does want more specific abysses to shine, like more single target focused abysses. But as always, I do tell people that the speedrunning community is like 90% about playing your favorite DPS and just learning how to get super fast runs with them. Most people I interact with don't care which team gets the fastest run overall. They only care if someone gets the faster run with the same team. And even with that, it's not an envy thing. It's actually cool when someone gets the faster run than you, because then you can learn how to improve your own gameplay and learn some cool strats. So yeah, most people don't really care. If you are interested, I recommend joining my Discord server and you'll see a bunch of people maining a bunch of different DPSs. Lastly, there's a few people asking about how he compares versus Klee, and honestly I don't think you can really compare them much. Sure, their teams can look similar, but their playstyles are very different. I'd say Klee is more of a melee playstyle. Also in vaporize teams, Lyney can be the one who vapes, whereas with Klee teams they usually have Furina vaping. I'd say playing Lyney feels much closer to playing ganyu, so that's a better comparison. They also both use Bennett and zhongli a lot. I would say the main advantage Lyney has from my experience versus ganyu is mono pyro, and mono teams being much easier to play than having to manage your melt strats with ganyu. But I think once you get into things like Lyney vape, then it's not that much different than melt ganyu in terms of difficulty. They both are annoying at that point. If anything, with ganyu melt you can play variations with zhongli, like zhongli, Bennett zhongli, whereas with Lyney vape there's no real room for a shielder. So overall, as you can tell, it's not really easy to compare characters. So yeah, that's been the Lyney FAQ. I try to answer as much questions as possible, but if you still have some, then feel free to ask things in the comments. And if you're going for Lyney on his banner, then good luck on your pulls. And thanks for watching. Hopefully you found this video helpful.